My name's Samuel Knoll. I'm a second year student at WRSM. We were assigned to do presentations of characters of Genesis, and I got Esau. So I want to talk to you guys about that, kind of some things that I pulled from it, some lessons that I've learned from this story, doing a little bit deeper of a research on it. It's actually always been a story I have evaded. In a sense, because I've always found it tricky between Jacob and Esau, how Jacob technically gets that blessing, because it seems a little bit like almost like a trick and a lie. But then the more I dove into it and the more I studied it, it kind of opened my eyes and it made a lot more sense to me. Thank you, Jesus. So it's officially a story I don't try and evade, which is nice. So I really do like that about the school of ministry. You know, there were so many books of the Bible too, so, the minor prophets and everything that I really just didn't really touch, didn't really open. You know, I get what I need from Psalms and Proverbs. You know, I think a lot of people think like that. I know I did for a long time. So I'm really thankful for that, and I'm thankful for Pastor Lage for all the work that he does, or you do, I guess, if you're watching, which you probably will be at some point. But just thank you for all the work you do and all the time you put into juggling everything around and having this, um, having this big part to play in all of our lives. So I really like the applicable side of this, and that's kind of what I'm going to stress on is the biblical application during the presentation, because Pastor Lloyd is really wanting us to stress on the factual side of things. For me personally, or for whoever else, I'm not really sure how that's working, but on the facts and on the details and on how it lines up with other things and everything like that. The correlation, just really digging into the depth of it on our papers. And so that's stretching me personally because I'm a big concept guy. I'm not a big detail guy, which has its pros and cons, but I'm really happy I got the story because there are some really interesting details and everything. So what I'm going to do here is just talk about the biblical application of all this, of Esau, of his life, of his story. So let's just jump in here. I kind of want to do a main run through of the story. I think most of us know the story already for the people listening. So Esau and Jacob were born, and they were born at the same time. And there was like this competition of who will be the firstborn type of thing. And as we know, Rebecca already was told who was going to serve who, so the first one that comes out, the firstborn, is going to serve the nextborn, right? So then you go through, Esau was the firstborn, he was mighty. Jacob was a little bit more inside guy, an introverted guy. But the cool part is, and these are some things that I'm going to stress throughout this, is that they contrasted so much, which you can read in the Genesis, the part 2 of Genesis on there, is they're such opposite people. That Esau is such this outgoing, driven person, and then Jacob's this like almost like introverted, very quiet kind of person, is like kind of what he's portrayed as. But which we can find really interesting considering they're born the same time, same age, raised in the same household, same environment. And so that's always struck a question in me, and that's why I love this, is because now I get to dive in and figure out why. Why'd they do that? And there's some really great lessons we can pull from that, which I'm super excited to talk about. But we can see that Esau, he was an outdoorsman. He loved the wild. He loved getting out. He loved doing that. And then Jacob loves hanging back. Well, Esau came in one day, traded his birthright. Most of you know the details of the story. So I'm going to just brief it. Esau then marries to these pagan women that his parents did not agree on, which his parents were Isaac and Rebekah. They did not agree on his marriages because they were two pagan women. And so then he grows up and he becomes a little bit rebellious to his inheritance, and it grows deeper, and his love for the world becomes a little bit stronger, which we're going to talk about too. Which and you can see it as almost like progressive in his life, as in this happens and this happens and then this happens and then this happens, and it grows like snowballs in his life. He grows rebellious of his inheritance and of his calling. So then Isaac blesses Jacob, thinking it was Esau, which is, in my opinion, the most tricky part of the story because it's like, whoa, like, are Jewish roots based off a lie? Like, is it based off deception? And so like it's always made me question that and always made me wonder that. But honestly, at the end of the day, it was God's will, period. You know, and so that we just can't argue with it. And Jacob, did go through trials and stuff to pay the consequence of that. There were things later on in the story you can tell that things like that kind of rolled up, and you could tell it building up, just like we were talking about the snowball effect. It was kind of the same. But you can really see him. It really makes you question and second guess where you stand on that. And for me personally, it just comes down to, what's the will of God? Is it being applied here? Yes. Like God told Rebecca what was going to happen, and Rebecca made sure that that's what happened. That's what was being put out and being displayed and being worked out, which is interesting. It's still tricky, but I talk about that a lot in my paper. And then we move on, and Esau becomes very upset and angry because Jacob got blessed, and Isaac said, I'm sorry, I can't bless both of you. I can't give you both that blessing of the firstborn. And there are a lot more details in this. I'm literally just like drifting by it here because I want to dive into the biblical application of this, because I find that quite a bit more important. And that's my job, is to filter all that out, all the facts, and show you the applicable side of things as a presenter of this story. So Jacob and Rebekah tricked him, like we just talked about, and Isaac couldn't give the blessing to both, so to both Jacob and Esau. So Esau becomes upset. Jacob escapes from Esau, and that's basically the story of Esau. Later on, they reconnect to bury Isaac when he dies. So, but before that, we're going to stick to this main story of the correlation between Jacob and Esau. So, there are three major points I want to cover, and I find this a lot easier to have like 3 points or 1 point or 5 points or something, just like, this is what we're covering. This is what I got out of this story. These are the most convicting parts of this story, reading through these huge books about Genesis, trying to obtain as much information as you can. Learning about the feast and the actual history of Israel has been extremely helpful and tangible when reading through this, because you see how deep these roots really go. I didn't realize how significant of a role all of these traditions played in it. Not to the extent I know now, and so I'm very, very blessed and thankful that that's been revealed to me. So the 3 major points is I want to talk about the trying to earn your own glory besides allowing God to give you glory, to raise you up in stature. The neglecting of your inheritance in God is the second point, and the third point is becoming comfortable with your blessing. So let's jump into the first point here, trying to earn your own glory, and we see that with Esau. And we've been talking about parallels in class and everything, and the parallel here is with Babylon. We see that they tried to earn their own glory. They built the tower and everything, and Pastor Lage talked about that. When you try and earn your own glory, when you try and use your strength, your knowledge, your understanding to earn your own glory, it leads you to destruction. It leads you to confusion. But whenever you become humble, like Abraham was, and like Abraham's father originally was, God wants to give you glory. He wants to use the one who's willing to admit, I need God's help. I need God. Period. I can't do this on my own strength. I can't do this on my own understanding. I can't do this. And it's so powerful, but it also can be a little bit confusing, because we see a lot of times in the Bible that God uses the weaker link. And like when he chose Israel, in fact, to become the nation, it's like, to become his chosen people, it's like they were slaves, like they were slaves to Egypt. They've hit the bottom the bottom of the bottom there, with that. And he could have chosen another nation, but he had a covenant and he had a promise with them, and he wanted to stick to that, and he wanted to be committed to that. And so he stuck with that weaker link. And look at the glory it showed, in Exodus when they got out of that. It's so powerful. It's such a beautiful and powerful thing. So, but Babel, they tried to build their own glory, and where did it lead them? It led them to destruction and confusion. And so for us, what we have to watch for with Esau, when he was born, he had that mindset of irreplaceable. I'm the firstborn. I have the firstborn rights. I am the one. I'm Isaac's favorite. I'm the guy. I'm the hunter. I'm the provider. I can do this. I'm irreplaceable. And actually, I want to talk about Pastor Eric. This has been a big thing, a huge thing, like top 5 things he has pushed really hard with worship band is you are replaceable. And I think this applies to every area of ministry, keeping the mindset of you are replaceable. There are other people that can do what you're doing. Because we can't put a limit on God like, I'm the only one God can use for this. No, that's not the truth. So that's been a very convicting thing, very, very life-changing thing I've applied in a lot of areas of my life. But this is something where we have to grab onto we can't earn our own glory. We are replaceable people, and we have to be and remain thankful that we have the blessings that we have, and that we've been given the position that we've been given, and we have to maintain humility and stay humble, even though we may be in a position or have the blessing of God on our life on a level that we don't deserve. So that's kind of the first one. Is let's parallel Babylon and Esau there. That they had that same mindset, as in Esau just said, I'm going to just keep doing this. I'm going to keep running forward. I'm going to keep moving forward. I'm going to go hunt, and I'm going to bring it back to my father, and I'm going to be his favorite, and he's going to want to bless me, and and all this stuff, and I'm irreplaceable. It doesn't matter. And so let's move forward, and we see this right here. We see it right here. So now he's to the point to where he is neglecting his inheritance, right? And he's becoming comfortable with this blessing. So he becomes comfortable with this being the firstborn of literally the inheritance of Abraham. Whoa, you know what I mean? This is huge. The calling on his life is huge. And the fact that he believed himself to be irreplaceable led him to this. He became comfortable with his blessing. So he came inside, and Jacob was cooking stew, and he basically just said, feed me, I'm starving. Jacob said, sure, I will, but first, trade me for the firstborn rights, basically, and he became comfortable with it to the point to where he agreed with that. And it says, and he left contempt, and he left okay with what he just did, okay with the decision, the fact that he just traded his blessing. He left okay with that. And I think the biggest thing here, in some of the books I've been reading about this, especially the Genesis book, they talk about, like I mentioned before, the difference between Esau and Jacob. The reason the story bothers me, though, is that I feel Esau became so content with where he was, in God, and he became so content with where God has taken him so far, that he neglected the power of the blessing he really had on his life. And so the difference between Esau and Jacob is Jacob saw something he needed to reach for, something that he felt like he had to reach for, and Esau felt like he already obtained it. And so for us, if I had to say the number one applicable thing in this whole entire story, is that we can't neglect the inheritance of our church, of saying you're a Christian. And we're reading in JD's class all these healing stories. Saying you're a Christian, the inheritance of that. We're learning all these stories that go way back, beginning of time. The inheritance we have is so powerful. And it's something we cannot neglect and not give up. We can't do it.